We live in a world where we've been trained to think that love, connection, desire, they all have to be loud. Big gestures, long texts, constant updates. But here's the thing, some of the most powerful signs someone misses you aren't loud at all. They're silent. And when you understand that, you start to notice the whispers between the words, the pauses between the actions. That's where the real story lies. Silence has this incredible ability to carry meaning. And it's not just about what's being said. It's about what isn't being said. Sometimes, the space someone leaves is actually their way of holding you closer. It sounds counterintuitive, right? You'd think if they missed you, they'd be flooding your phone or knocking on your door. But for a lot of people, silence is the truest language they know in those moments. Think about it. When someone truly feels your absence, it creates this gap in their life. Every time they reach for their phone and stop themselves from texting, every time they think of a story they want to tell you but don't. Those are tiny acts that build up inside them. They're not choosing silence because they don't care. They're choosing silence because they care so much they're afraid of what opening that door might bring. Sometimes it's fear of vulnerability. Sometimes it's wanting to give you space. And sometimes it's simply the way they cope with missing you, by holding back. Now, here's where most of us go wrong. We take silence personally. We think, if they cared, they'd say something. But silence is not always absence of feeling. In fact, silence often is the feeling. It's the H that sits in someone's chest when they don't know the right words, or when they're not sure if the timing is right. I've spoken to people who, after a breakup or time apart, say, I didn't reach out because I didn't want to make things harder for them. That's love in disguise. They were thinking about you in that silence. They were missing you in that silence. Every day they didn't speak, they were feeling you even more. When you understand this, you stop measuring affection only by what you can see or hear. You start tuning in to a different frequency. You notice the way someone still likes your posts but doesn't comment. The way they keep that old photo of you, both in their living room. The way mutual friends mention your name and their whole demeanor changes. They're not saying a word to you, but they're speaking volumes without realizing it. There's something almost poetic about that kind of quiet. It's not the grand fireworks of romance, but the steady ember of connection that refuses to die out. And the beautiful part is, silence like this often means the person is taking your presence in their life seriously. They're thinking before they speak. They're holding back because they know once they open that gate, it could change everything. But here's the catch. You can't always rush in to fill that silence. That's where a lot of us sabotage the moment. We get uncomfortable, we panic, and we start chasing answers. Instead, give the silence room to speak. Sometimes, if you listen closely, it'll tell you more than words ever could. There's a reason why music isn't just made of notes. It's made of pauses too. Without the pauses, there's no rhythm, no meaning. Silence in relationships works the same way. It's not empty, it's part of the song. And when someone's silence comes from a place of missing you, it's often the deepest verse in that song. So the next time you feel that quiet between you and someone, don't jump straight to fear or doubt. Ask yourself, what if this isn't a wall? What if this is their way of holding on without grabbing too tightly? Because when you see it that way, you stop mistaking silence for indifference and start recognizing it for what it really is. The quiet proof that you're still on their mind. And when you can read that language, you'll never miss the message again. When someone pulls back, it's so easy to think it's about you. your brain immediately goes to, what did I do wrong? Did I say something? Did they lose interest? And that's because our instinct is to fill any gap in attention with a story. But more often than you think, their silence, their retreat, isn't a sign of less care. It's a sign of how much they care. It's just that, for some people, pulling back is their way of coping with emotions they can't yet put into words. See, missing someone can be overwhelming. It's not just a gentle tug. Sometimes it's a flood. And when that feeling hits, not everyone knows how to swim through it in a way that feels safe. For many men, especially, the instinct isn't to move closer. It's to step back. That step back isn't because they've stopped thinking about you. It's because they're processing. They're figuring out what these emotions mean, what they want to do about them, and how to do it without losing control of the situation. Imagine you've got a fire in your living room. It's not dangerous yet. It's warm, it's comforting. But if you keep throwing logs on without thinking, it could get out of hand. Pulling back, for them, is like stepping outside for a moment to breathe, to decide how to keep that fire from burning the whole place down. Sometimes it's not even about you directly. It's about them. Maybe they're scared of rejection. Maybe they've been hurt before, and missing someone reminds them of the pain they felt when they lost someone in the past. Or maybe they're worried that if they show too much, too soon, they'll come across as needy or desperate. So they create space, not because they don't feel the pull toward you, but because they feel it so strongly that it unsettles them. And here's another layer. For some, pulling back is their way of keeping your connection sacred. They don't want to turn missing you into something casual or diluted by constant contact. They want it to stay meaningful, so they resist the urge to chase every single moment they think of you. It's their way of protecting the quality of your bond, even if it means enduring the ache of not reaching out. I've seen this happen so many times. A guy disappears for a week or two, and you're sitting there thinking, that's it, it's over. But then, when he comes back, you realize he wasn't gone emotionally. He was marinating in the feeling of missing you. That space allowed the feeling to grow stronger, not weaker. And when he finally stepped forward again, it wasn't out of obligation. It was because the time away made him certain he wanted to be there. This is why you have to be careful not to misread the pullback as disinterest. If you rush in with panic, demanding answers, filling the space with messages, you can unintentionally interrupt their process. They're not ignoring you. They're making sense of what they feel. And the irony is, that space they take is often the very thing that deepens the bond when they return. Think about it like this: when someone steps back, they create a vacuum. Nature hates a vacuum. It wants to be filled. In that quiet, they start to notice the absence of your voice, your laugh, your presence. They replay memories in their head. They wonder what you're doing, and little by little, missing you turns into wanting you back in their life in a bigger way. But that process can't happen if you chase them every time they step away. It's also worth remembering that pulling back can be a self-protection move. If they're falling for you hard, that can be terrifying. Missing someone is a vulnerable state. You're admitting to yourself that this person has power over your emotions. And not everyone is ready to hand over that power. So they step back, hoping the space will make them feel safer. But what they often find is that the space just confirms how much they want you. Your job in these moments isn't to decode every move or to close the gap as quickly as possible. Your job is to hold your ground, to show them that you're not going to crumble just because they need a little air. That steadiness, that security, is what makes it easier for them to step back in without fear. So the next time someone pulls away, instead of thinking, they must not care, try asking yourself, what if this is their way of figuring out just how much they do? Because more often than not, that's exactly what's happening. When someone misses you but isn't saying it out loud, their feelings tend to leak out in these small, almost invisible ways. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss them. That's the thing about longing. It rarely announces itself with a big, cinematic confession. It shows up in little slips, tiny habits, and moments you might dismiss if you're not tuned in. You might notice they still watch your Instagram stories, even if they haven't messaged you in weeks. It's subtle, but think about it. Out of all the people they could scroll past, they're still checking in to see what you're up to. That's not random. That's curiosity with an emotional thread attached to it. And sometimes they don't just watch. They watch within minutes of you posting. It's like they have a radar tuned to your frequency, even if they'd never admit it. Or maybe they find excuses to cross paths. They happen to be at that cafe you love. They show up at a mutual friends gathering when you didn't think they'd be there. They're not saying, I miss you. But they're placing themselves in your orbit, because being near you, even without a conversation, fills some part of that empty space they've been feeling. Another one, they bring you up in conversations with other people. You hear from a friend, oh, they were talking about you the other day. And it's never in a casual, forgettable way. It's detailed. They remembered the trip you took last summer, the joke you told, the way you drink your coffee. These are not the recollections of someone who's moved on. These are the mental souvenirs of someone who's been replaying you in their mind. Pay attention, too, to the way they interact when they do see you. There's this micro-hesitation, like they're taking you in before they speak. Their eyes linger a beat too long. They remember small details you didn't think they noticed. Maybe their body turns slightly towards you even when they're talking to someone else. These are not accidental. When someone misses you, their presence is drawn to you, even if their words don't follow. You'll also see it in the way they keep certain connections alive. They still follow your siblings on social media. They still like your friends' posts. They're keeping a thread between your worlds because cutting it completely would feel too final, too much like admitting you're gone. This is how people maintain closeness without directly knocking on your door. And sometimes it's even more hidden than that. They might keep something of yours, a hoodie, a mug, a photo, and not because they're too lazy to return it. They keep it because it's a tangible way to keep you close when they can't have you in person. They might not even consciously realize that's why they still have it. But on some level, that object becomes a placeholder for your presence. Here's the thing, none of these actions scream, I miss you. They whisper it. And those whispers are easy to ignore if you're only looking for the big declarations. But when you learn to read them, you realize that the quiet signs are often more honest than the loud ones. Loud can be performative. Loud can be for show. But these subtle gestures, they're unguarded. They slip out when their walls are down. And it's not about obsessively decoding every move someone makes. That can drive you mad. It's about stepping back and asking yourself, does their behavior line up with someone who's indifferent, or with someone who's still tethered to me in some way? When you put the pieces together, the social media checks, the casual run-ins, the lingering attention, you start to see a pattern. And patterns are rarely accidental. The beautiful irony is that when someone is trying to keep their feelings quiet, they often end up revealing them in the smallest, most human ways. A song they share without context, a random memory they text you about late at night, a laugh that's just a little softer when it's something only the two of you would find funny. They think they're being discreet, but missing someone has a way of slipping past even the best defenses. So while it might feel at times like silence is a void, if you pay attention, you'll realize it's actually a canvas. Those small, almost forgettable actions are brushstrokes. And together, they paint a picture of someone who, even in the quiet, hasn't really let you go. One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking that all silence means the same thing. It doesn't. There's a world of difference between someone taking space because they're processing feelings and someone pulling away because they've lost interest. If you can't tell those two apart, you either end up chasing someone who's already gone or pushing away someone who just needed a little time to breathe. When someone is still connected to you emotionally, their silence feels different. It's not cold. It's not final. There's still an energy there, a thread that hasn't been cut. Even if they're not reaching out, you can sense it in the way they respond when you do speak. They might take a while to reply, but when they do, there's warmth in their words. They remember details you've shared. They ask about things you've told them before. The conversation feels alive, not flat. When someone has truly disconnected, the silence feels heavier. It's not just space, it's absence. The energy between you goes hollow. Even if you reach out, the replies are minimal, detached, sometimes even polite in a way that feels like distance. They don't build on the conversation, they just close it down. It's not a pause in the story, it's the end of the chapter. The tricky part is that both scenarios, space, taking, and disconnection, can look the same from the outside if you're only counting how many times they text or how often you see them. That's why you have to go deeper than just measuring contact. You have to pay attention to the tone, the subtext, the way you feel after interacting with them. Do you feel a spark, even a small one? Or does it feel like you're knocking on a door no one's behind? Another sign is how they hold on to the connection in indirect ways. Someone who's still emotionally invested, even during a quiet phase, will keep some bridge between you. They might still watch your stories, still show up in places you're likely to be, still check in through mutual friends. They don't completely disappear from your world because they're not ready to. Someone who's disconnected tends to let those threads fade. They stop being in your orbit altogether, not out of malice, but because they've already stepped out emotionally. It's also important to notice what happens when you stop making the effort. If they're just taking space, they'll eventually come toward you again. It might not be immediately, but the pull is still there, so they'll find their way back. If they're disconnected, your silence will simply create more silence. There's no magnet left to bring them closer. And I want to be clear, sometimes people who miss you still stay quiet for longer than you expect. That's why you can't panic too soon. But the difference lies in whether the connection still has life in it. If the warmth is gone, if the curiosity about your life has vanished, that's when it's less about space and more about moving on. We also have to be honest about our own role in this. Sometimes we convince ourselves they're just taking space because it's easier than admitting they're done. But clinging to that hope when the signs point to detachment only drags out your pain. The goal here isn't to make excuses for someone. It's to learn to tell the truth about what's actually happening so you can respond with clarity instead of fear. When someone is taking space, the healthiest thing you can do is allow it without chasing, without filling it with insecurity. That's what lets them process and come back on their own terms. When someone has disconnected, the healthiest thing you can do is accept it and begin creating your own distance too. The mistake is treating disconnection like space or space like disconnection, because one needs patience and the other needs closure. So the real skill is learning to feel the difference. And when you can, you stop wasting energy on the wrong people and start giving space in the right moments to the right ones. When someone is missing you in silence, the way you respond can either keep that connection alive or quietly shut it down without you even realizing it. The natural instinct, when we sense someone pulling back or going quiet, is to react, either by chasing, demanding answers, or filling the space with more and more contact. It comes from a good place. You care, you want clarity. But sometimes, reacting in that way can push the other person further into their shell. The truth is, missing someone is a vulnerable feeling. For them to even be in that space where they're thinking about you, but not speaking up, means they're holding those emotions close, maybe even protecting them. If you charge in too fast with questions or pressure, you can make them feel cornered. And that's when people shut down even more. The goal isn't to force them to open the door. It's to leave the door open so they feel safe walking through it. Responding gracefully means recognizing the value of patience. It's letting them sit with their feelings without rushing them into action. That doesn't mean you do nothing, but it means you choose your moves carefully. When you do reach out, keep it light and warm. Share something that made you think of them without attaching a demand for a reply. Offer a moment of connection, not a test they have to pass. Another part of this is protecting your own emotional balance. If you start obsessively waiting for them to make the next move, you put your happiness in their hands. That kind of energy comes across, even through a screen. But if you stay grounded in your own life, your work, your friends, your passions, you show them, without saying it, that you're someone worth coming back to, someone who isn't collapsing in their absence. That stability is magnetic. Grace also looks like listening without judgment when they do open up. If they finally admit they've been missing you, don't punish them for the silence. Don't make it about how long it took or how they should have handled it differently. That's tempting, because you probably have your own hurt about it, but turning it into a scorecard can make them regret ever opening up in the first place. Instead, acknowledge it. Appreciate the honesty. That positive reinforcement makes it more likely they'll share openly in the future. Sometimes responding gracefully is about subtle reciprocity. If you sense they're missing you but hesitant, match their pace instead of outrunning it. Give them space, but leave a little warmth in the air between you. It's like tending a fire. You don't smother it by piling on too much at once, but you also don't let it die by ignoring it completely. You feed it just enough so that when they're ready to lean in, there's still a glow there. And here's something a lot of people overlook. Grace doesn't mean pretending you don't care. It's not about acting aloof or playing games. It's about caring in a way that leaves room for the other person to step toward you instead of being dragged. You can be warm, kind, even a little flirty, as long as it comes from a place of confidence instead of need. If you think about it, the times you've missed someone most intensely were probably the moments when they felt just out of reach, but not gone. That balance is powerful. It keeps the connection alive without turning it into a chase. By responding gracefully, you create that space for them, close enough to feel you, far enough to want to come closer. And let's not forget that how you respond now sets the tone for the relationship going forward. If you handle their silence with patience and kindness, you teach them that you're a safe place for their feelings. You show them you can handle the ebb and flow without panicking or punishing. That's rare, and people remember the ones who make them feel safe to feel. So when someone's missing you, but keeping it quiet, your job isn't to drag the words out of them. It's to stay steady, stay open, and meet them where they are. Because the right response in those moments doesn't just keep the connection alive, it deepens it. When you start to recognize the silent ways someone shows they miss you, it changes everything about how you connect with them. You're no longer guessing or guessing every move. They don't have to spell it out for you because you're tuned into the deeper signals. And when you can interpret those signals with empathy instead of insecurity, you create space for the connection to grow instead of getting tangled in confusion. Turning silence into connection is about meeting them where they are emotionally, not where you wish they were. If they're the type who takes time to process their feelings before speaking them out loud, you can make that silence feel less like distance and more like safety. Instead of letting that quiet stretch turn into a wall, you treat it like a bridge, something you can slowly walk across with subtle, intentional actions. This could be as simple as sending them something that has no pressure attached. A photo of a place you know they like. A quick note saying you heard a song that reminded you of them. Not a demand for an answer, not a long conversation starter. Just a small, warm reminder that the door is still open. What you're doing is telling them, I see you, and I'm here, without forcing them to leap into vulnerability before they're ready. The beauty of approaching it this way is that it shifts the dynamic from tension to trust. You're not in a tug of war over who's going to break the silence first. You're inviting them to step closer in their own time. And when they do, it's not because they were pushed. It's because they wanted to. That difference is huge. It's also about holding yourself in a place of calm confidence while you wait. If you fill their silence with overthinking, anxious texts, or emotional outbursts, you turn the quiet into something heavy and uncomfortable. But if you continue living fully, seeing friends, chasing your passions, laughing at life, you're showing them that you can handle the ebb and flow of closeness without falling apart. That steadiness makes it much easier for them to come back in and reconnect without fear. And let's be honest, silence isn't always about them testing you or holding back deliberately. Sometimes life really does get in the way. Work gets intense, family issues pop up, personal struggles demand focus. If you've learned how to interpret the difference between silence that's empty and silence that's full of feeling, you can give grace in those moments instead of creating unnecessary friction. That patience alone can make someone feel more drawn to you, because it's rare to find someone who doesn't take every pause personally. Another part of turning silence into connection is using it as a moment for you to reflect too. When you're not constantly reacting to every message or lack of message, you have the chance to check in with yourself. How do I feel about this person? Do I enjoy who I am when I'm with them? Is this connection really adding to my life? Sometimes the quiet is a gift that lets you see things more clearly, both about them and about you. When you start seeing silence as a space instead of a void, you stop treating it like a problem to be fixed. You realize it can be part of the rhythm of a healthy connection. Just like music needs pauses to create impact, relationships need moments of space to create depth. If someone misses you in that space and you respond with warmth, steadiness, and subtle invitations, you're reinforcing the bond in a way that words alone can't do. Eventually, the silence breaks. Maybe they send you a message. Maybe they show up at your door. Maybe they call out of the blue. But when that moment comes, it's richer because it wasn't forced. They're not showing up to end an awkward stand-off. They're showing up because they genuinely want to close the distance. And when they feel welcomed instead of judged, the connection between you becomes stronger than it was before the quiet even started. That's the real power of understanding the silent move that says they miss you. It turns what most people see as distance into an opportunity for closeness.